Ahyumu was a shameless loner who was on track to gooning to death until he got murdered by a lunatic. However, everything changed when he got resurrected as an overpowered zombie by magical girls who want to help him get revenge in exchange for his immortal bone. One night, Ahyumu went to the store to get something and became intrigued by a silver-haired girl named Hellscythe who was sitting outside. When he tried talking to her, he fumbled hard and tried to cover it up by dancing like he was some court jester. However, when he fell down, she approached him and started talking with him through her notepad. After having a fun conversation with her, Ahyumu bought her a croquette and bid her farewell. As he happily walked home, he heard someone scream, and when he looked, he saw bloodstains on a nearby window. Immediately, he recalled the news about a serial murderer on the loose, but instead of calling for help, he went into the house to play Sherlock Holmes. He hadn't even made it past the bloody hall when someone stabbed him with a sword, and he fell dead. However, he woke up later in the cemetery to find Hellscythe kneeling beside him. When he asked how he wasn't dead, she revealed that she was a necromancer and that she resurrected him as a zombie. Hearing that he was now one of the walking dead made him freak out, but Hellscythe managed to calm him down and promised to stay with him and ensure he never eats brains. A month passed, and he had fallen into a comfortable routine of cooking and caring for Hellscythe, who moved in with him to keep her promise. Aside from that, he patrolled the area every night, hoping to catch the murderer on the loose. One night, while he was taking a break in the cemetery, he encountered a chainsaw-wielding nut job and immediately assumed she was the culprit. However, the girl, Haruna, told him to shut up and get out of her way. Before he could react, a large bear showed up from behind and turned him into beef kebab. Surprisingly, the girl didn't seem to care as she launched herself up for an attack and sawed both Ahyumu and the bear in half. Once the bear disappeared, she congratulated herself for a job well done, but Ahyumu spoke up from the ground, shocking her. She immediately asked how he was still alive, and Ahyumu told her it was because he was a zombie. He then asked who she was, and she said that she was a magical garment girl in training, adding that the bear she just defeated was an evil monster called a megalo. She then tried to wipe his memory because he knew too much. However, her powers suddenly stopped working, and her clothes vanished, causing her to scream and start kicking Ahyumu. Later, a reconstructed Ahyumu sat in his living room with Hellscythe and an annoyed Haruna, who declared that she'd be living with them until her powers returned. Apparently, he had unintentionally absorbed her powers when she tried using them on him, so now he was stuck with the sassy girl until he figured out how to return them. Haruna then asked to use his phone, but surprisingly, she had never seen one like it before since she was from a magical world. Ahyumu managed to explain how it worked, so she took it and called her head teacher to tell her what happened. Meanwhile, somewhere in the city, a megalo disguised as a human was looking for Haruna because he'd sensed her power. The next day after school, Ahyumu stayed back because the sun was too hot for a zombie to be walking around. However, the disguised megalo arrived to find him because it was drawn to Haruna's power that was inside him. The megalo walked up to him and said it wanted him, causing Bro to freak out because he didn't want to get cracked by a creepy grandpa wearing makeup. He was desperately trying to protect his manhole when Haruna arrived and told him that the sus guy was a megalo. It then transformed into a large crawfish, but when Haruna tried her magical girl transformation, she failed because Ahyumu now had her powers. Seeing this, the megalo tried to attack her, but Ahyumu quickly acted as her shield. The megalo then shot its claw at them like a missile, but Ahyumu used his supergooner hand to catch the punch. He then began punching the exiled Bikini Bottom resident and sent it flying, but as a result, his arms were broken. When the megalo got back on its feet, Haruna covered herself up with a curtain and told Ahyumu that he had to transform into a magical girl if he wanted to defeat it. Ahyumu didn't want to be on some Lil Nax vibes, but Haruna assured him that public opinion wouldn't matter in the afterlife, so he picked up her chainsaw and repeated the incantation after her. As soon as he transformed, he started complaining because he hadn't expected to end up in thigh-high socks, a pink frilly gown, and a bonnet. However, Haruna told him to shut up and embrace his Okama side. Even the megalo reg-baited Ahyumu by calling him a multiversal mistake, so he charged at it and sent it flying outside the window, drawing the attention of those still around. Mid-air, he finished off the megalo, and when he fell back to the ground, everyone was surprised to see him in a dress. Ahyumu tried explaining things, but the students started taking photos of him for TikTok, and Haruna made it worse by announcing that he was a magical garment girl. Fortunately, he managed to save his social life and dignity by using Haruna's powers to wipe everyone's memories. A week later, during lunch break, he pulled out the bento Haruna had prepared for him and was surprised to find it stacked with eggs. His friend Orito happened to walk by just then, and he, too, was surprised to see that Ahyumu was on an exclusive egg diet. Ahyumu claimed he was trying to buff up, and when he took a bite of the eggs, his taste buds sent a satisfying zing throughout his body. Believing he was exaggerating, Orito tasted the eggs and almost had a mouthgasm himself. He immediately alerted their classmates to the culinary goodness, and that was how Ahyumu lost his lunch. That night, when he got home, Haruna demanded a food review, and he told her that she might have a future in the culinary industry if she learned to cook something other than eggs. Haruna pointed out that he was being rude and then demanded that he make dinner, since she couldn't get enough of his cooking. Feeling like a 5-star Michelin, Ahyumu cooked up one of his best dishes, and when Haruna saw it, she started drooling like a starving animal. Ahyumu told her not to ruin his appetite, but he promptly forgot about her her when Hell Scythe asked for a second helping. As usual, he started imagining her speaking to him, and his smile creeped Haruna out. As they continued eating, a girl suddenly appeared at the table and asked Ayumu to feed her as well. Instead of freaking out, he acted like it was a normal Tuesday, and a few minutes later, their plates were empty. Haruna then asked the girl who she was, surprising Ayumu, who had assumed they were friends. Once he confirmed that she wasn't friends with Hell Scythe either, he finally demanded to know who she was. The girl said her name was Seraphim and that she was a vampire ninja charged with finding and bringing Hell Scythe back to her village. Upon hearing this, Heliskath wrote in her notepad, asking Ayumu to kick Seraphim out, but he said he didn't want to mess with a vampire. When she kept insisting, Seraphim asked Ayumu what his relationship with Hell Scythe was. The idiot told her that he was her guardian and started imagining stupid things again, but Hell Scythe set the record straight by clarifying that he was her servant. Seraphim then requested that Hell Scythe take her on as her second servant, but Hell Scythe declined, stating that one servant was enough for her. Seraphim tried to convince her that she was more valuable and useful than Ayumu, which pissed Ayumu off, so he told her to show him some respect in his home. The girl argued that a cultured idiot like him didn't deserve any and challenged him to a duel, which he rejected because his advocacy for gender equality stopped at throwing hands. Seraphim told him he had no say in the matter because she was going to prove his incompetence to Hell Scythe, whether he liked it or not. In the end, Ayumu gave in, so they went to the cemetery to duke it out with Haruna as their only spectator. Before they started, Seraphim revealed that she wouldn't take it easy on Ayumu because she knew he was a zombie. The next moment, she created a weapon out of leaves and began attacking him. Ayumu managed to dodge her attacks, and when he fell, she used the weapon to slice a headstone in half. Suddenly, she disappeared, and when she reappeared, she was behind him, and she didn't hesitate to strike him. When Ayumu fell, she called him a pathetic weakling, and then continued her brutal assault on him, much to Haruna's delight. A few moments later, she lodged her weapon in his chest, so Ayumu held onto it and told her it was his turn to let loose. Before she could react, he headbutted her, but to his surprise, she transformed into a log, and her real body appeared in the sky, sporting wings. She then unleashed her swallow return strike on him, convinced that it would secure her victory. However, Ayumu retaliated by throwing his severed arm at her like a boomerang and knocking her out of the sky. He then tried to give one of those underdog speeches, but suddenly got struck in the head by a throwing star. Despite this, Seraphim admitted defeat and left, but when Ayumu and Haruna returned home, they were surprised to find her there. Seraphim told them that her defeat didn't change anything and that she was willing to become Ayumu's servant to complete her objective. Hearing this, Ayumu started smiling creepily and said she would have to wear a maid's outfit and do everything he asked. When he demanded that she call him master, she told him that he wasn't worthy of such a title, bruising his fragile man ego. Later that night, as he lay in bed, Seraphim suddenly opened the latch in his ceiling and demanded to know what he'd done to make Hell Scythe act like an ice queen. Ayumu asked when she became a psychologist, but explained that Hell Scythe had always been like that. Seraphim didn't buy it and pointed out that unless he fixed what was wrong with Hell Scythe, she would be less inclined to help her, meaning she wouldn't move out. After she left, Bro stayed up thinking about what she said and wondering if something was truly wrong with Hell Scythe. The next morning, during breakfast, Ayumu observed Hell Scythe and wondered if she'd been serious when she called him her servant. His thoughts were soon interrupted by Haruna, who asked him to give her another bowl of rice. Seraphim also asked for more food, but she was rude about it, so he told her to learn some manners and stop acting tough all the time. Annoyed by his jab, she argued that a worthless maggot like him had no right to talk to her like that. Before things could escalate, Haruna handed Ayumu his packed lunch and asked if she could add a side dish next time. Haruna told him to either eat it like that or drop dead, prompting Hell Scythe to slam her hand on the table. When they turned to look at her, they saw that she'd written on her notepad that it wasn't nice to joke about death. Ayumu tried to defend Haruna, but because he put his hand on her head, she got pissed and threatened to unalive him. The next moment, Hell Scythe slapped her, shocking everyone into silence. She then told Haruna that dying was painful, and in response, Haruna offered her some of Ayumu's eggs and ran out of the room to hide as it started raining. Looking out the window, Ayumu commented that the universe was crying on Haruna's behalf, but the girls didn't seem to care as they asked him to give them more food. A few days later, while the girls were waiting for their breakfast, Seraphim commented that Ayumu had a lot of weird stuff in his house. Ayumu explained that his parents, who were off exploring the world like Dora, often sent back things they found fascinating. Seraphim then told him that his character development was thanks to his parents not wanting to be around him. When Ayumu started complaining that Haruna was being rude, Haruna went rummaging through the fridge and found some pudding. However, when she pulled it out, Hell Scythe grabbed her hand and shook her head. So later, they played Jenga to determine who would eat the pudding, and Seraphim joined in to increase Hell Scythe's chances of winning. As they played, she wondered whether Ayumu made it to school in one piece because the sun was hotter than your ex. Haruna said he'd taken an umbrella, so he ought to be fine, but Seraphim still called him a fool. According to her, he should have stayed home, seeing as he was a living corpse. Haruna Haruna agreed, but reminded her that Ayumu was more stubborn than a baby goat, so she ought to expect the unexpected. Meanwhile, at school, Ayumu was on the verge of drying out despite having an umbrella. When one of his classmates asked if he was doing alright, he told her that he was sensitive to the heat. Just then, they heard Orito embarrassing his bloodline in what he believed was the perfect act of rizzing. When the girl turned him down, the stupid idiot quickly moved on to the next girl and was shot down faster than a bullet train. Hoping to cover up his shame, he asked Ayumu to accompany him to the bowling alley since they were such good friends. Ayumu sympathized with him for being unable to bag a date, but Orito claimed he was tired of flirting with girls. He also said that girls were mid and hanging out with them made his intelligence regress. Unknown to him, the girls who had just rejected him were standing behind him, and they heard everything. Ayumu quickly cut him off and agreed to accompany him so that he'd stop digging his own grave with his words. Later, after school, as Ayumu and Orito sat in a booth at the food court, Orito mocked Ayumu for buying a mask along with his food. Ayumu said the staff had recommended it, but Orito still mocked him, saying that if he wore it, girls would think he was lame. Surprisingly, all the girls at the place were wearing similar masks, but Ayumu chose not to point it out. After their meal, they went to the bowling alley, and Orito spent his time ogling girls instead of picking up a ball. Ayumu could only feel shame on his behalf, but all that vanished the moment Orito drew his attention to Seraphim and the others. As he began wondering why he had to run into them there, Orito started analyzing them and telling Ayumu what he thought the girls looked like underneath their clothes. Ayumu's first thought was to call the cops to take the cultured fool away. However, he suddenly freaked out when it dawned on him that it might expose his connection to the girls. Orito's finding out was equivalent to their classmates finding out, and that would spell doom for him. Refusing to let that happen, Ayumu got up, saying he was going to the restroom, but the clueless Orito insisted that he play around first. His loud voice drew the girl's attention to him, and Haruna started waving Ayumu over, but he refused to look at her. Orito assumed she was talking to him and excitedly told Ayumu about it, but Ayumu still refused to raise his head. Seeing this, Haruna walked over to them and demanded to know why Ayumu was airing her. Ayumu, who was now half lying on the chair, swore she had the wrong person, and when he sat up, he was wearing the mask he had bought earlier. Not only that, but he said he was the masked Ayumu, prompting Orito and Haruna to give him the "Are you for real" look. Just then, Seraphim and Hellscythe came over, and Seraphim asked Ayumu if he thought he was at a lucha libre match. Hearing how casually she spoke, Orito shook Ayumu and demanded to know how he knew the girls, but Ayumu didn't say a word. When he tried to take the mask off, Seraphim told him to leave it on because she preferred looking at it over his ugly mug. Ayumu didn't have a problem with this, but as soon as Haruna revealed that they lived with him, he pulled it off and screamed at her. On the other hand, Orito passed out from shock, and when he regained consciousness, he tried to calm himself down with an energy drink. However, that didn't work, and he demanded a detailed explanation of how Ayumu ended up living like a harem king. Ayumu explained as best as he could, but the pea-brain degenerate was more interested in knowing what base they had gotten to. He went as far as imagining dirty things and started banging his head against a bowling ball because he wished he were the lucky one. Ayumu told him he wouldn't wish his life on anyone, but Orito said he didn't care and challenged Ayumu to a bowling match. He said if he won, Ayumu would let him move into his house and didn't give him a chance to refuse. In the end, Ayumu won, and the dramatic Orito crumbled to the floor in tears. However, he stopped when he got a text, and while he was reading it, the girls started teasing him. The texter was asking to see him, and they assumed it was his girlfriend, but Orito explained that it was his friend Kyoko. Following this, he took Ayumu with him to visit Kyoko, who was in the hospital after surviving the serial murderer's attack. When they arrived at Kyoko's room, she was surprised to see Ayuma and Orito teasing her about having bed hair in front of her crush. Immediately, Kyoko put her hair in pigtails, and Ayumu handed her the bouquet they brought. Kyoko thanked them for the gift and said she was glad they had come to see her, as she planned to move to Kyoto once she was discharged. Orito said it was a wise decision, then took the flowers to put in a vase. While he was away, Ayumu and Kyoko fell into an awkward silence until Ayumu asked if she'd gotten a look at the culprit. Kyoko said that she had, and as she described the person, an image of Hellscythe popped into Ayumu's head. He assumed Kyoko had made a mistake, but she assured him that she hadn't, as the culprit had unalived her parents before coming after her. Suddenly, she moved closer to him and shook him as she pleaded with him to tell her who the culprit was, but he didn't say anything. Just then, Ayumu noticed a wooden sword underneath her bed, and Kyoko said her grandfather had given it to her for protection. She then hugged him and admitted that she was scared the culprit would come after her again. However, Ayumu didn't say anything because he refused to believe that Hellscythe was responsible. That night, while Haruna and Seraphim made dinner, Ayumu sat with Hellscythe in the living room, wondering if what Kyoko had said was true. A little while later, dinner was served, but the soup looked like it had been scooped out of a witch's cauldron. When Ayumu pointed out that it was a safety hazard, Seraphim told him to do a taste test for them. Hesitantly, he dipped his chopsticks into the pot and was shocked when they melted, but Seraphim didn't seem to care. She ladled some of the acidic soup into a bowl and told him to drink it before the bowl melted. Forgetting that he had free will and could use it, Ayumu drank the soup and immediately transitioned to the afterlife. A few moments later, he came back to life, so Haruna and Hellscythe demanded that he feed them. Seraphim insisted they could manage the soup, which, by the way, had melted through the pot and table. But Ayumu wasn't interested in dying again, so he ordered pizza. When he got off the phone, Haruna borrowed it to speak to her teacher and told him that she had yet to find the artifact. After she ended the call, the others asked what artifact she was talking about, and she told them it was something called the Terror. As she was explaining what it looked like, the doorbell rang. So Ayumu went to answer it, thinking the pizza delivery guy had broken speed limits to get there. However, what he found was Anubis playing dress up, and he was shocked. The dog man then introduced himself as Kerberos and said he was the guardian of the underworld, there to retrieve Ayumu's runaway soul. The next moment, the girls heard a commotion coming from the entrance, and when Ayumu stumbled into the room, his arm was bleeding. Kerberos was directly behind him, prompting Haruna and Seraphim to start gearing up for a fight. However, Hellscythe remained calm, and when she healed Ayumu, Kerberos recognized her. Apparently, he'd been wondering where she'd been, and now that he'd seen her there, he understood why Ayumu wasn't on Hade's roster. He then joined them for tea and complained that Hellscythe had failed to inform him about Ayumu. Hellscythe claimed she'd forgotten, so Kerberos dropped the topic and asked Ayumu if he understood the implications of Hellscythe healing him. Bro obviously had no idea what the Hellhound was talking about, so Kerberos warned Hellscythe not to push herself too hard. He then spilled his tea all over himself when he tried drinking it and bid them farewell, saying he was going to collect the souls of those who'd been murdered a few houses away. Upon hearing this, Ayumu insisted on tagging along, hoping to find clues about this wannabe Jack the Ripper. However, Kerberos stopped a few roofs away from the scene and told Ayumu that he was surprised that Hellscythe had used her powers on him. When Ayumu asked why, he explained that, just as Kuma did, Hellscythe took on the pain of those she healed. Ayumu couldn't believe his eyes, but Kerberos swore he was telling the truth. He said that Hellscythe's healing Ayumu meant she considered him special, so he better not screw up. A few minutes later, they arrived at the scene, and Kerberos confirmed that the souls of the dead were no longer in the house. He'd expected this because the number of missing souls had recently increased. Ayumu asked where the souls could have gone, and Kerberos said they had most likely been sacrificed in exchange for power. He was in the middle of explaining further when the culprit showed up, so he jumped in front of Ayumu, forgetting he had plot armor. Despite this, Ayumu still got stabbed, and before Kerberos vanished, he implored Ayumu to always take care of Hellscythe. By the time Ayumu returned home, the girls had devoured all the pizza, but he didn't care and told Hellscythe that he needed to speak with her. They then went outside, and the first thing he did was apologize for the pain he felt when bringing him back to life. Hellscythe told him she was fine, as it wasn't her first rodeo, but Ayumu still felt guilty. He also wanted to know more about her, so he asked why she always kept her emotions bottled up. Hellscythe said she hadn't signed up for a therapy session, but Ayumu insisted that he had to know, so she wrote something in her notepad again. When she handed him the paper, he saw that she'd written something about the thread of fate swaying and wavering. She also said the reason she didn't speak was that her words were enchanted and could cause harm to those around her. If she did speak for whatever reason, she would feel extreme pain in her head. Her power wasn't something she could control, which was why she always wore her armor and gauntlet, but the worst part was that her body would still produce magic even after her death. That last part shocked Ayumu, and when he turned to look at Hellscythe, he saw that she was crying. She then asked if he would hate her now that he knew the truth, and Ayumu became pissed. He was also confused as to why she'd think that way, and Hellscythe said it was because no one wanted to be around a freak of nature. Ayumu angrily told her that even if he got paid, he could never hate her because she was the kindest person he'd ever met. His sudden outburst shocked her, so she asked if it was alright for her to stay by his side. Instead of responding, Ayumu snatched her notepad, and after reading what he wrote, Hellscythe cried even harder. Being a gentleman, he comforted her and promised that, come what may, they would weather the storm together. A few days later, Moby Dick rode into town using his specialized waves, so Seraphim flew Ayumu to meet him. When they got close enough, she threw him like a rag doll, and Ayumu attempted to drop kick the mega whale back into the ocean. However, all he succeeded in doing was kicking off one of its giant buttons, which fell and almost isekai'd people. Seraphim then returned to Ayumu's home and scolded him for trying to destroy the city like the Avengers did each time they faced an enemy. Ayumu tried to defend himself, but Haruna suddenly threw her chainsaw down and told him to suit up. Having no choice, he transformed and returned to the fight against the Megalo, who shot a magical beam at him and Seraphim. They managed to evade the attack, but the Megalo gave them no room to fight back. When it started descending, Haruna created a barrier to keep it from crushing the city and screamed at Ayumu to cut off its head if he wanted to defeat it. Seeing as its neck was thicker than your girl's, he asked Seraphim to make her sword bigger and make an incision on the monster's neck. Seraphim obliged, and while she was prepping the sashimi, Ayumu started powering up. By the time he finished, his outfit had changed, indicating that he'd become more powerful. Ayumu disliked his new fit, so he quickly flew higher, and when he came back down, he was like a homing missile. With one powerful kick, the Megalo's head separated from its body, triggering an explosion that destroyed it completely. Ayumu and Hellscythe just stood watching, while Haruna jumped for joy joy, and Seraphim was nowhere to be found. However, later on, Ayumu witnessed her kissing Haruna, after which she sank her fangs into her neck. While she drank her blood, Ayumu felt his blood rushing to certain places and wondered why he hadn't been invited to the show. When Seraphim finished her meal, Haruna collapsed on her knees and asked why she hadn't been gentle. Just then, Seraphim noticed Ayumu, so she went to confront him for being a peeping Tom. Not surprisingly, he couldn't defend himself, and a little while later, he began questioning what he'd witnessed. Since it wasn't already obvious to the pea-brained idiot, Seraphim reminded him that vampires needed blood to survive, and explained that she'd kissed Haruna to calm her down. Ayumu then told her that she could also come to him if she needed blood, but Seraphim said she preferred her blood fresh. Later, while Ayumu was doing the dishes, the girls went to bathe together, and their happy squeals made Bro wish he could join them. Suddenly, his phone rang, disturbing his lewd thoughts, and when he answered it, he realized it was Haruna's teacher, Ariel, on the line. He told her that Haruna couldn't come to the phone and offered to relay any message she had. She asked him to tell Haruna to forget about the artifact, which was actually tofu from Kyoto. Apparently, she'd asked Haruna to go to Kyoto to get it, but the directionally challenged gnome ended up in Tokyo instead. Ariel wasn't entirely surprised by the mix-up because Haruna's attention span was shorter than Master Shifu. Ayumu then offered to get her the tofu since he was more reliable, and as they were discussing Haruna, she pulled the door open. She told Ayumu that she needed some ice cream, and he began scolding her for coming to him in her towel. While they were arguing, her teacher quietly hung up as she didn't want to intrude on whatever was going on between them. Unaware of this, Ayumu told Haruna that it was her teacher on the line and asked if she wanted to speak to her. The girl refused and ran out of the room, leaving him confused about her behavior. He then tried to return to the phone call, but discovered that the woman had already hung up. Just as he decided to finish up his chores, the phone rang again, and this time it was Kyoko on the line. Ayumu greeted her warmly and said he'd been thinking about calling her to ask for help getting tofu since her grandfather lived in Kyoto. Kyoko told him she would get some for him, so they made plans to meet the next day at Ayumu's favorite spot. After he hung up the call, he seemed too happy for someone just meeting a friend, and when he noticed Hellscythe and Seraphim were observing him, he froze. The next day, after dinner, he asked Harana if she wanted to accompany him to get the tofu, but she said no. Despite her response, she tried to tail him, and when Ayumu teased her about it, she claimed she was going to the store before running off. Her terrible tsundere act left him disappointed, so he continued on his way. Shortly after he arrived at the cemetery, Kyoko also arrived and handed him the tofu. Ayumu apologized for inviting her to such a creepy place and then asked how much she wanted for the tofu. Kyoko said she was giving it to him for free because she was happy to help him with something he needed. She then shyly asked if he had a girlfriend, and Ayumu told her that no one would date a loser like him. Kyoko immediately volunteered to take the role, shocking him, but he didn't respond, so she walked up to him. She said if the position weren't up, she would take something else, and before he could ask what, she stabbed him with a sword. After he fell, she removed the sword and asked how many more times she had to stab him for him to stay dead. Confused, Ayumu asked who she was, and she admitted that she was the culprit. The story about her family being murdered before her eyes and her surviving the attack was all a lie made up by her. The family she claimed was hers was a group of random people whose memories she'd manipulated, as she'd done with Orido. This statement made Ayumu realize that Kyoko was a magical garment girl, and she confirmed it by transforming. She then told him that it was time for him to clock out permanently and started attacking him. Ayumu managed to dodge most of her attacks, but she still had the upper hand and made sure to abuse it properly. When the opportunity presented itself, he tried to run, but she used her powers to freeze him in place. Just then, Haruna called out to him, asking where her teacher's tofu was, and Ayumu couldn't believe that she didn't see him as a priority. Seraphim was also there, and even though she insulted him as usual, Ayumu couldn't have been happier to see her. When Haruna got closer, she undid the spell Kyoko used on him, and Kyoko became pissed. It turned out that she knew Haruna, but Haruna had no idea who she was, and that pissed her off even more. Seraphim then approached her, and when she summoned her weapon, Kyoko bragged that they were the same. The next moment, her eyes began to glow, and a black clock appeared on her body, surprising them. However, Seraphim confirmed that Kyoko was a Walmart budget vampire. She then charged, creating her weapon mid-sprint, but Kyoko wasn't the least bit impressed when she used her swallow return strike. She told Seraphim that she lacked power and hit her with a fireball to prove that her powers were superior. Next, she tried to roast Ayumu, but Haruna quickly created a barrier to protect him, which ticked her off even more. So, she created mini tornadoes which released chilly winds, and once Haruna felt it, she fell to her knees. The chill was similar to something a megalo would create, and Haruna started wondering whether Kyoko was a tri-breed. With Haruna out of commission, Kyoko told Ayumu that the odds were even again, but Seraphim woke up just then and told Ayumu to transform. Bro had hoped to avoid doing that, but seeing as Kyoko wasn't your regular side quest villain, he had no choice but to do it. He and Seraphim then charged at Kyoko, but she sent her tornadoes to handle them. Ayumu managed to evade the one chasing him and got closer to Kyoko, but she used her swords to defend against his attack. As they struggled against each other, he asked why she'd unalived so many people, and she casually said it was to gain immortality. Ayumu's anger towards her instantly doubled, but it didn't serve him well because she pushed him into the tornadoes. As he struggled to break free, she stabbed him, but Ayumu latched onto her and began powering blowing up. The next moment, Seraphim flew towards them and stabbed Ayumu, making sure that the weapon passed through Kyoko as well. After Kyoko fell to the ground dead, Ayumu changed back, but as Haruna began complimenting Ayumu, Kyoko suddenly stabbed Seraphim. Shocked, Ayumu asked if she was a zombie, but Kyoko laughed and told him that just like a cat, she had more than one life. She then tried to burn him again, but Hellscythe arrived and saved them. Surprisingly, Kyoko had been waiting for the necromancer all along because she wanted her powers. Excitedly, she started attacking Hellscythe, but the girl had Infinity turned on, so none of Kyoko's attacks touched her. Despite this, Kyoko kept attacking her, so Hellscythe picked up Haruna's chainsaw and chanted the incantation. Ayumu was shocked, but he could only watch as Hellscythe transformed and began approaching Kyoko. Kyoko was increasingly becoming excited, and she complained that Hellscythe was wasting her talents and time on a loser like Ayumu. When she attacked her again, Hellscythe floated away, but used magic to leave a message instructing Ayumu and the others not to follow her. When Kyoko finally caught up with her, she said it was noble of her to want to keep her friends away from all the carnage. She then started shooting off attacks in different ranges, and each shot peeled off the flesh on her arms. However, Kyoko didn't care, as she was in a state of madness, enjoying every bit of it. From where he stood with the others, Ayumu commented that Kyoko was impressive, but Seraphim disagreed. She said the psycho girl was only aura farming because she was scared of dying. At that moment, Kyoko stopped attacking to catch her breath, so Hellscythe told her to go home, and she felt insulted. When she tried to attack again, Hellscythe spoke for the first time, and the next second, Kyoko fell to the ground dead. Ayumu couldn't believe his eyes, so Seraphim revealed that Hellscythe had spoken the word die. Her words were even more powerful than Toge's cursed speech, so it made sense that Kyoko immediately fell dead at her command. Seraphim's explanation made Ayumu realize why Hellscythe had reacted the way she did when Haruna carelessly told Ayumu to die. As they watched on, Kyoko got back up, but Hellscythe told her to die again, and she did. This went on for a while, and each time, the ringing in Hellscythe's head intensified, but Kyoko kept getting back up. Eventually, the crazy girl busted her eardrums, so she couldn't hear Hellscythe's words anymore. She then hugged Hellscythe and released her magic, turning herself into a human bomb, which took Hellscythe down. Feeling proud of herself, Kyoko turned to give Ayumu and the others a mocking smile, which rightfully pissed them off. Haruna picked up her chainsaw, which had landed next to her after the explosion, and told Ayumu that she had the unnatural urge to reenact the chainsaw massacre. Seraphim also got up and said she had a new move she wanted to test out. Ayumu told them he was right behind them, so Seraphim charged at Kyoko and attacked her, using leaves she had woven together. Kyoko easily defended herself, pushing Seraphim back, so Haruna took over the assault mission. Unfortunately, Kyoko beat her and threw her down the hill like a piece of crumbled paper, and she crashed into Ayumu. Seraphim immediately rushed to check on them, and as they looked back at Kyoko, they were shocked to see that she'd stabbed herself. When they went to check on her, she got back up and pulled out the sword. Not only was she alive, but all her injuries were gone, and she started complaining that she'd lost a lot of lives because of them. As she began staggering towards them like a mindless zombie, Ayumu took the chainsaw from Haruna and transformed. Kyoko laughed and used a strike to cut him, but Ayumu stood his ground even though Seraphim and Haruna scolded him for not moving out of the way. He told all of them that he wouldn't cower because Hellscythe hadn't, and she never took joy in the fact that she had to unalive Kyoko so many times. In response, Kyoko told him he sounded lame and kept striking him, but Bro refused to back down. This just pissed her off even more, so she attempted to slash him directly, but Ayumu caught the blade in his hand and broke it. Immediately, her magical garment costume disappeared, leaving her in only her cloak. Experiencing his brute strength up close put fear back in her, so she started backing away. Ayumu then told her that he wanted to thank her for unaliving him, because if he hadn't gone through such an experience, he never would have learned to appreciate life, which was why he wanted to give her the same gift, as he was sure she would feel the same way after receiving it. Realizing what he was about to do, Kyoko tried to escape, but Ayumu didn't give her the chance and cut her down like a tree. When she woke up again, he did the same thing and continued until all the lives she had stolen were exhausted. At that point, Kyoko became visibly terrified and started begging for her life. Ayumu felt zero sympathy for the girl. However, because he wasn't a heartless monster like her, he couldn't bring himself to give her the Saitama special, so he punched the ground beside her head instead, and she passed out from shock. A little while later, Hellscythe woke up, and she asked if everything was over. Ayumu answered that it was, so she commended him for a job well done and reminded him to feed her when they got home. Just then, they heard someone talking, and when they turned around, they saw Haruna's head teacher, Ariel, squatting beside Kyoko. She said if Ayumu had unalived Kyoko, she would have done the same to him. In response, Ayumu said if she'd educated her student properly, things wouldn't have played out the way they did. Instead of clapping back, Ariel enveloped Ayumu in a ring of fire as a warning. She then said she would take Kyoko back with her but asked for her tofu first, since that was why she had come in the first place. Unfortunately, the tofu had gone all soggy, but Ariel didn't mind and said she'd make mabo tofu with it. The next second, Kyoko woke up, but to everyone's surprise, the voice coming out of her didn't belong to her. Ariel immediately recognized the body snatcher as the king of the night, but he said he wasn't there to chat. He promised to give them attention the next time they met, and as he disappeared, he bid Hellscythe farewell. Ariel then told Haruna that she was going after the king, and when Haruna tried to protest, the woman told her to focus on her studies. The moment she left, Ayumu asked Hellscythe who the king of the night was, and she wrote down that his energy was similar to that of a zombie she had once eliminated. A few days after everything returned to normal, Hellscythe joined Ayumu in the yard while he was eating some rice balls, so he asked about the king of the night since he wanted to know who he was. Hellscythe explained that she turned the guy into a zombie some time ago, but when he turned evil, she got rid of him, or so she thought. Curious, he asked if she'd been involved with the guy romantically, and Hellscythe shook her head. This made the simp feel relieved, so he renewed his promise to remain at her side. Just then, Haruna hit his head with a plate of rolled omelet she had made for him, so he started complaining. Seeing as he wasn't appreciative of their hard work, Seraphim took the plate and walked back inside. Haruna followed almost immediately, so Ayumu went after them to apologize, leaving Hellscythe alone. Sometime later, Ayumu tried to study for his upcoming tests because he didn't want to spend the summer in makeup classes. Unfortunately, his study session was hijacked by Haruna, who swore she was the reincarnation of Einstein. When he started yawning, she whacked him in the head with a plastic hammer and told him to pay attention. Seeing this, Hellscythe offered Ayumu a notebook with all the solved equations, but Haruna swiped it away, claiming that some were wrong. As she scribbled her corrections on them, she also marked out the possible test questions, leaving Ayumu in disbelief. Surprisingly, on the day of the test, Haruna's predictions turned out to be true, and Ayumu was glad that he didn't toss the book away. Shortly after he finished writing, he pulled back the curtain to look outside and was shocked to see Haruna. The girl had used suction cups to stick herself to the window and told Ayumu that she needed him to take care of some megalos which had just appeared. She said this loudly, so he angrily told her to stop shouting, drawing everyone's attention to him. When he opened the curtain again, she was gone, so he wondered how he'd get there. After the bell rang, he went to the entrance, but before venturing into the scorching sun, he called home to ask if they knew where Haruna was. Seraphim told him what she knew, adding that Hellscythe said he should channel his inner Barry Allen to get there in time. Ayumu promised to do his, but the sun said not today, so he had to sneak around like a creep to avoid getting the life sucked out of him. Shortly after he left school, Ariel called to ask him to collect a package for her. Curious, he asked what was in the said package so he wouldn't accidentally commit a crime, but Ariel told him it was none of his business. She also told him to ensure that Haruna didn't find out about the package. After she hung up the phone, Ayumu had to do a mad dash on a bridge because it had no cover. Unfortunately, he hadn't gone far when all the moisture in him got sucked out, so he had to dive into the flowing river. Meanwhile, Haruna was fighting a horse megalo and losing. After it overpowered her with its strange mist, it tried to take her plot covers for some reason. However, Ayumu arrived just in time and pulled on the horse's hair. Instead of thanking him for saving her dignity, the ungrateful girl started complaining that he was late. Ayumu told her to calm her non-existent plots, but at that moment, the horse started trashing around and sent him flying. Fortunately, his spidey reflexes kicked in, and he managed to push himself off the wall towards the chainsaw, which he used to slap the horse. Still, it tried to attack him again, so he began punching it, only for the sun to suddenly shine through and dry him out like a twig. Realizing that he needed all the help he could get, Ayumu transformed, and the horse charged at him. He met the attack head-on, but as he fought it, Haruna screamed at him to watch his back. Before he could make sense of what she was saying, he was stabbed in the back by a jellyfish megalo. After it hit him with a high-voltage shock, it tried to take his plot covers, but got disgusted when it discovered he was actually a guy. It then set its sights on Haruna, and its friends joined it to harass her. Just as things were about to get worse, a ramen delivery guy named Yuki suddenly showed up and took down the megalos by tossing the soup on them. Seraphim also showed up, and she took down the last jellyfish with a throwing star. Yuki was happy to see her, but Seraphim treated him like he was a thief and tried to break his arm. Confused, Ayumu asked who Yuki was, and Seraphim explained that he was a vampire ninja from a rival faction. When she let go of him, Ayumu tried to check his arm, but Yuki pushed him away, saying he didn't need his help. As they argued, Haruna suddenly got angry and pushed Ayumu, causing him to fall on Yuki and kiss him. When Ayumu pulled away, he realized that Yuki wasn't a dude but a girl and jumped back in shock. Suddenly, Haruna punched him for being a degenerate, even though she was the one responsible for the accidental plot grab. Seraphim also punched him because hurting Ayumu was what she lived for. As he lay on the ground, Haruna walked off, feeling much better, but Yuki looked like she wanted to disappear. A little while later, Yuki took Seraphim and Ayumu to her faction's headquarters so they could see how their megalo-defeating soup was made. While there, she had them try the ramen, and Ayumu said that he couldn't wait for Naruto to taste it. When he praised the pork, Yuki shyly gave him hers and said he could order another bowl if he wanted. As a foodie, that was music to Ayumu's ears, but he pointed out that she had yet to explain how they created the magic soup. Yuki gladly took him through the step-by-step process, and by the time she finished, Ayumu was even more confused than before. Unbothered, Yuki told him that in case of a megalo outbreak, they had created a device which would make it rain ramen soup. Seraphim didn't think bathing the city in soup was a wise decision, so she told them she was leaving before before she got infected with stupidity. Before she could walk away, Yuki asked if she would like to join the faction, and Seraphim immediately refused. When she walked away, Ayumu asked her to wait for him, which made Yuki angry for some reason, so she kicked him out. On the way home, Seraphim revealed that Yuki was mad at him because he was leaving her alone on their wedding night. Ayumu's first thought was that he had misheard, but Seraphim explained that in their clan, kissing was considered a marital action, and since he kissed Yuki, they were practically married. Ayumu argued that the kiss had been a mistake, but Seraphim said it didn't matter in vampiric laws. He then asked what would happen if he kissed her. Seraphim said she would have to swear her love and loyalty to him. However, she promised that he wouldn't live long enough to experience it. The next day at school, a girl dropped off Ariel's package with Ayumu, and when he opened it, he found a pair of glasses. Before he could put them on, Yuki showed up with lunch and said she was fulfilling her duty as his wife. Ayumu told her that their so-called marriage was invalid, but Yuki told him that he couldn't get out of it. Just then, Ordo walked up to them, and when he saw Yuki, he addressed her as Tominari. Yuki angrily told him to stop calling her that because it wasn't her name, but Orito insisted that it was. Because of that, she beat him up, but he still wrote out her name on the board and told Ayumu to read it. Ayumu confirmed that Ordo was correct, but Yuki said his eyes weren't working properly. She then made him wear Ariel's glasses, and he was shocked to discover they were high-definition peeping glasses. However, as a cultured man himself, the idiot didn't take them off and enjoyed the sights as he walked home from school. That was until some young ones accidentally whacked him in the face with their toy, and the glasses flew off his face. He immediately went after it, and just as he caught it, a truck appeared and knocked him onto the curb. Fortunately, the glasses remained intact, but his relief soon turned into shame when Seraphim suddenly showed up and took the glasses. Apparently, they were for her and not Ariel, so she cursed him out for using them to fulfill the dirty desires he didn't even know he had. The next day, Haruna dreamt she was wearing her magical garment girl costume while standing next to Ayumu. However, her clothes suddenly vanished, and when she tried to cover up, he told her not to hide her knickknacks from him. Not only that, but he kissed her, and she let him. The next moment, she woke up screaming and panting like she'd been doing an intense workout. Meanwhile, Ayumu was in his room sleeping, but the way he was caressing his pillow made it obvious his dream wasn't suitable for public viewing. Unfortunately for him, his dream was cut short when Haruna knocked the door down and started beating him up because she blamed him for her dirty dream. Later, he sat in the living room with Seraphim and Hellscythe, but none of them sympathized with him, and Seraphim said he'd gotten exactly what he deserved. At that time, Haruna was packing up his lunch, but her anger hadn't gone away yet. She knew that her dream had come about because she was jealous of the kiss Ayumu and Yuki shared, but she was determined to blame Ayumu instead. Hours later, during lunch break, when Ayumu opened his lunch, he was surprised to see that Haruna had packed seaweed strips for him. Ordo was also surprised by the menu change, but he still ate it and announced that a party was happening in his mouth. As expected, their classmates gathered around, and that was how Ayumu lost his lunch again, but he didn't seem to care. Their next class was physical education, but Ayumu skipped it and tried his best to stay out of the sun. After the class, everyone hit the locker room, and in the girls' locker room, Yuki happened to overhear Ayumu's classmates talking. She nervously asked the girls if she could speak to them about Ayumu, and they agreed because they were curious. After school, the three girls went to the burger place, and Ayumu's classmates were shocked when Yuki told them that she needed their help to fall in love with Ayumu. Kanami asked why anyone in their right mind would want to be with a first-rate loser like Ayumu, and Yuki said she had no other choice. She did her best to explain the situation without revealing too much, but insisted that falling in love with Ayumu was her only option. The only problem was that she never had a crush before, and she didn't know what to do to make him like her. Kanami suggested that she try cooking for him, and for some reason, Yuki imagined herself in nothing but an apron, playing the hardworking waifu role. Immediately, the imagination ended. She cringed so badly and started crashing out until one of the staff shushed her. After he walked away, Kanami explained that when she suggested cooking, she meant making Ayumu lunch every day. The dumb Yuki seemed to like this idea, and as she declared she wouldn't lose, Kanami cut her off, saying she needed to work on herself, too. According to her, if Yuki kept talking and acting like one of the bros, she would be brozone for life. Since the word on the street was that Ayumu was into girly lolis, Kanami advised her to start acting like one. Yuki wasn't sure she could pull it off, but since her mama didn't raise a quitter, she promised to give it her all. The next day, when she brought the lunch she prepared for Ayumu, she spoke calmly and shyly, but the clueless idiot didn't seem to notice. He was more interested in the food and complimented how good it looked. His words made Yuki happy until that glutton, otherwise known as Orito, tried to taste it first. She immediately slapped his hand away and snatched up the box, as she told him that he wasn't allowed to eat the food she prepared. When she placed the box down again, she asked Ayumu to hold on for a few seconds, then baptized the food in ketchup and other sauces. Seeing this, Bro instantly lost his appetite, but he had no choice but to eat the food. After school, Yuki approached Ayumu Ayumu and asked if they could walk home together. He found the request a little bit sus, but he agreed, and as they walked, Yuki kept thinking of how to strike up a conversation. When nothing came to mind, she tried holding his hand, but chickened out at the last second. Suddenly, Ayumu asked what kind of house a vampire ninja lived in, but Yuki told him not to say stuff like that in public. She didn't realize that she was raising her voice, so he quickly covered her mouth. However, this made those passing by call them shameless exhibitionists, so they immediately jumped apart. As they continued walking, Ayumu warned Yuki to stop calling him her husband, but Yuki told him to suck it up and accept his new reality. Soon, they arrived at the crossroads leading to their houses, but before leaving, Ayumu told Yuki that they would only be friends. Yuki immediately rejected his offer, saying that any relationship they had would be as lovers. Her outburst caught people's attention again, so the embarrassed Ayumu asked if she had an inbuilt speaker. As they started arguing, Haruna arrived and kicked Ayumu, so he asked what he'd done this time. She said seeing his face put her in a bad mood, even though she'd been on her way to pick him up. Not surprised, Ayumu asked if she wanted to go somewhere and hang out, and Haruna's mood instantly shifted, but Yuki insisted they take her with them. Ayumu didn't see a problem with that, but decided it would be more fun if they invited Seraphim and Hellscythe as well. Haruna didn't like this new development, but she didn't say anything and let them plan the outing for their next day off. When the day came, Ayumu and the girls visited the mall since their idea of a hangout was shopping. They made the broke idiot pay for their clothes, carry their shopping bags, buy them lunch, and fund their arcade experience. However, Haruna was seething with jealousy the entire time because she didn't like how close Yuki was with Ayumu. So when they were on the Ferris wheel later, she told Yuki she was dumb for thinking that a kiss meant she was automatically married. Serpahim defended Yuki, saying it was their tradition, and when Haruna mentioned their own kiss, she told her it didn't count. After they got off the ride, Haruna approached Ayumu by the vending machines and asked him to kiss her. At the same time, Hellscythe was playing with the plushies she won from the claw machine when the King of Night walked up to her in another body. Back at the vending machine, Ayumu refused to kiss Haruna, so she got mad and beat him to a pulp. When they returned to where the others were, they discovered that Hellscythe was missing, and Ayumu became worried. Unknown to them, she was on a rooftop with the King of the Night, who claimed that he was happy to see her again. Hellscythe didn't share his feelings, so she summoned her scythe and attacked him, but he didn't move to defend himself. When the blade dug into his flesh, he told her that she wasn't being nice and asked if she really hated him that much. Back in the park, Seraphim speculated that one of her superiors had abducted Hellscythe because her real mission was to assassinate her. Shocked by her revelation, Ayumu shook Seraphim, demanding a proper explanation, but she was too ashamed to speak. Back on the rooftop, Hellscythe asked King if he blamed her for what happened to him, and he said no. He explained that he returned because he wanted them to be as they were in the past. Hellscythe replied that it was impossible, as she still couldn't forgive him for murdering the Seventh Abyss. When she found out what he'd done, she verbally ordered him to disappear, and he did because her powers were irreversible. However, he didn't die as she thought, and now he was back. Hellscythe then asked what he truly wanted because she knew reconciliation was the last thing on his mind, but he ignored the question. Instead, he said he was surprised that a wet blanket like her could make friends and actually have fun. Then he put a coin into the tower viewer and looked down at Ayumu and the others. They were still waiting for Seraphim's explanation, so she finally decided to speak up. She told them that her superiors believed Hellscythe's power was responsible for all the Megalo attacks, and Ayumu said they were stupid. Seraphim agreed, but said it was her duty as a ninja to carry out her duties no matter what. Her statement pissed Ayumu off even more, so he asked if she was a brainless puppet who couldn't function without a puppeteer. Seraphim couldn't answer his question, so she tried to walk away and start searching for Hellscythe, but Ayumu refused to let her. He wanted to know why she couldn't just give her superiors the middle finger and do what she knew was right. Once again, Seraphim said he wouldn't understand because it was a ninja thing, and Yuki backed her up. Realizing he was fighting a losing battle, Ayumu decided to take the emotional route. He asked if Seraphim's mission was more important than Hellscythe's life, and Seraphim angrily told him to stop trying to guilt trip her. Ayumu also lost it and told her to answer him, since the question was simple. When he kept pushing, she snapped and said she would never do anything to harm Hellscythe, and Ayumu backed off. Haruna then ran to stand between them and said they were wasting precious time arguing. After she and Yuki ran off to begin the search, Seraphim thanked Ayumu for helping her see that it was okay to defy authority when they were in the wrong. As they walked off, King moved away from the viewer and asked Hellscythe to see how her friends were desperately searching for her. Initially, she didn't want to, but he was very skilled in talk no jutsu, so she gave in. As she watched them, he told her that if she continued refusing to listen to his demands, their safety wouldn't be guaranteed. To show how serious he was, he snapped his finger, and the Ferris wheel came off and barely missed Ayumu, but that was enough to frighten Hellscythe. Deciding to milk the situation, King predicted that something far worse was about to happen, and the next moment, a giant toy duck fell out of the sky. When Ayumu and the girls saw it, they tried to run, but Haruna tripped and fell, so the duck sat on her and refused to get up. Seeing this, Hellscythe pleaded with King not to let Haruna go, but he swore that he wasn't the one responsible. When she gave him a confused look, he reminded her that strange things happened whenever her emotions stirred, which was why she chose to live like a mime. However, since meeting Ayumu and the others, things have have changed, and her once closed-off heart has started to break free. When he referred to her as the harbinger of death, Hellscythe fell to her knees in despair, and King smiled victoriously. However, the moment didn't last as Ariel showed up and complained about him harming her student. Back in the park, Seraphim hit the duck with a blast, but it didn't work, so Ayumu tried punching in, and that also didn't work. As a last resort, Yuki began pulling on its cord, hoping it would do something. As Ayumu began pulling Haruna's arm, Ariel fired a magical blast at the duck and sent it flying, thus freeing Haruna. Unfortunately, the duck landed on Yuki, knocking her out completely, and when they tried to wake her, they heard a robotic voice. The next moment, the duck was blasted into pieces, and Yuki rose to her feet, but she wasn't herself. As her friends watched on, she began muttering strange words, and a strange golem appeared behind her. The golem seemed to respond to what she said, which caused her friends to panic. From the rooftop, Ariel noticed Ayumu didn't have his chainsaw, so she used her magic to send it to him. Despite finding it strange that the chainsaw suddenly appeared out of nowhere, Ayumu quickly grabbed it and transformed. The next moment, the golem fired a powerful blast, which would have wiped out half the city if Ariel hadn't set up a barrier. After Ayumu's transformation, he asked Seraphim and Haruna to stay back and then approach Yuki without his chainsaw. The golem immediately shot a hole in his thigh, but Ayumu didn't back down. He kept walking until he got to her. The first thing he noticed was that she was crying, and even though her eyes were vacant, she was quietly asking for his help. Ayumu assured her that he'd do just that, but at that moment, the golem activated its self-destruct sequence, leaving him confused. Yuki then screamed at him to stay back, but Ayumu stubbornly pushed through the barrier. He also fought through the electrical currents attacking him until he finally managed to hug her. Yuki began sobbing uncontrollably and told Ayumu that he should have listened to her, but he said he would never leave her. Those words made her think of their time together, and when it seemed like she'd accepted her fate, the golem powered down and returned to its place in her body. However, when Ayumu let go of her, Yuki punched him because he made the mistake of calling her Tomonori. On the rooftop, Ariel praised Ayumu's skill, but as a hater, King struck him with lightning and told Hellscythe that he would be back to get his wish granted. After he vanished, Ariel went after him, so Hellscythe returned to Ayumu and the others, who were relieved to see her. They then began walking home, and shortly after saying goodbye to Yuki, Hellscythe gestured that she wanted to drop by the store, so Ayumu offered to go with her, but she refused. Deciding to respect her wishes, he left with Seraphim and Haruna, but when they got home, he realized he shouldn't have left Hellscythe alone. This was because he found her notepad tucked away in his pocket, and in it, she had written a farewell letter. She blamed herself for all the bad things that had happened to them and said it would be best if she went away. Ayumu immediately ran to the store to look for her, but she was already gone, so he returned home to grieve. While he was crying outside, Haruna suddenly kicked him and told him not to give up already because they were going to bring Hellscythe back. Unfortunately, a few months passed, and she still hadn't found Hellscythe, nor had she returned home. One evening, while Ayumu was about to leave home to continue the search, he ran into Haruna fighting with the laundry. When she discovered that it was his shorts that were attempting to suffocate her, she got pissed and threw them at him. After they went back inside, he fed her some potatoes, and she was on cloud 9. Just as he tried to join her, they heard a sound in the hallway and rushed to check. To their surprise, it was Seraphim, and she looked like she'd been to hell and back. After she took a bath and got her wounds bandaged, Ayumu asked what had happened to her. Seraphim explained that she returned to her clan, hoping they had information about Hellscythe, but they had turned on her for abandoning her duty. Ayumu sympathized with her, but Seraphim assured him that she was over it and even made a joke. Convinced that she was truly okay, Ayumu asked Seraphim if the reheated bath water had been to her taste, and the girl froze. However, she decided not to jump to conclusions and asked Ayumu if he'd made her use the same bath water he'd washed his junk in. When Ayumu failed to respond, Seraphim's eyes turned red in a threatening manner, so he started begging for his life. Just then, the doorbell rang, saving him from execution, and Haruna rushed to answer it. She said she'd ordered Antonio spaghetti, but what she received was a violin. Ayumu wasn't even surprised, as the girl was famously stupid when it came to a lot of things, so it made sense that she'd read the item description wrong. Looking at the instrument, Seraphim said it was a nice piece, so Ayumu asked whether she knew how to play it, and she said yes. It turned out that she used to be in a band back in her village, so Ayumu asked her to play something for them. Seraphim immediately declined because she didn't think he deserved her melodic tune, but she couldn't resist the instrument's pull, so she started playing it. Later that night, Ayumu went to the store, and as he sat outside eating a rice ball and thinking about Hellscythe, he saw King. The guy was speaking to an old lady, and after she walked away, he turned to face Ayumu. Ayumu immediately demanded to know where Hellscythe was, but King had no idea where she was. All this while, he'd assumed she was with Ayumu, but after hearing what he said, he was convinced she'd returned to the underworld. Just then, Seraphim and Haruna arrived, so Ayumu screamed at them not to come any closer. Haruna assumed he was trying to mess with them and started complaining, but Seraphim took one look at King and recognized him. Seeing all of them together, King decided he would get rid of them, which pissed Haruna off. When she tried to pick a fight with him. Ayumu told her not to be reckless and stand down. King then unleashed his black mist on him, and the next thing Ayumu knew, he was getting punched. This surprised him as King never moved from his spot, but he was smart enough to understand what happened. The second attack cut off his legs, so he could only watch helplessly as King went after the girls. Fortunately, Seraphim had good reflexes, so he sliced one of King's arms off when he came for them. Unfazed, King commended her, but the next second, he strung her up like a piece of meat and began mansplaining his plan to force Hellscythe to return by unaliving them. Haruna assured him that he wouldn't succeed, but King said she was adorable for trying to act tough. As he said this, he enveloped her in white mist, but Haruna refused to be intimidated. She told him his parlor tricks wouldn't work on her and demanded he give up. In response, King tried to attack her, but she was saved by Yuki and the members of Seraphim's clan. They had been searching for King, and now that they had located him, they weren't about to let him go. Seeing this, King decided it was time to leave. Not because he was scared, but because he wanted to die and getting captured would hinder that. Ayumu was confused when he said this, because he'd been so sure he knew what King's plans were. After King vanished, the background vampires chased after him, leaving behind their leader, Sarah and Yuki. While Yuki was helping Haruna glue Ayumu's legs back, Seraphim tried to talk to Sarah, but the girl responded harshly. Seeing this, Ayumu asked Yuki why she teamed up with them, and Yuki explained that it was better that way since they had a common enemy. Once she finished gluing Ayumu back together, she left to help with the search for King, but that was when Ayumu realized his legs were on backwards. Since it wasn't something they could easily fix, Haruna began dragging him back home. Along the way, Seraphim said she was going to keep searching for Hellscythe, so Haruna warned her to be careful. The next day, Yuki suddenly called Ayumu and gave him the address where Hellscythe was staying. She pleaded with him to get there before the Vampire Alliance, so he thanked her and called Haruna downstairs to tell her the good news. However, they had no idea that Hellscythe was standing outside the gate. Seraphim happened to return at that moment, and when she saw Hellscythe, she was overjoyed. She tried to go to her, but was suddenly stabbed by King, who came out of nowhere and instructed Hellscythe to come with him. The necromancer didn't try to resist, but before leaving, she dropped some of her blood in Seraphim's mouth to heal. A little while later, the vampire woke up inside the house and tried to get up, but Ayumu wouldn't let her. Seraphim then revealed that Hellscythe had been outside the house, and the moment she mentioned that it was King who stabbed her, Ayumu rushed out of the house. Haruna wasn't far behind, and after a few minutes of running, they arrived at the location Yuki had told them about. Surprisingly, King welcomed them inside and even served them lunch. Haruna happily ate the food, but Ayumu couldn't relax around King. He asked him to return Hellscythe to them, but King ignored his request and started talking about how boring immortality was. Suddenly, the door was slashed open, and Sarah demanded that King surrender. Seeing that his dinner party was now ruined, King placed a bomb on Haruna's head and jumped out of the window with Hellscythe. Ayumu tried to go after them, and for a moment, Hellscythe reached for him. However, she pulled back at the last second and let King take her away. Sarah immediately ordered her people to track them down and stormed out, but Yuki stayed behind to help with the bomb. When she got too close to Haruna, the bomb attached itself to her head, causing her to freak out. But a few seconds later, it returned to Haruna's head. Ayumu then suggested that they try to deactivate it, so Haruna returned the bomb to Yuki and started playing the guessing game. Before Ayumu could stop her, she cut the green wire, and surprisingly, the timer stopped counting. However, as soon as they began celebrating, it sped up, so Ayumu had no choice but to collect the bomb. The girls told him it wasn't the time to play hero, but he reminded them he was a zombie. He then jumped out the window and flew high up, but when he began falling, he wondered why Hellscythe had pulled away from him and then closed his eyes as the bomb went off. Following the explosion, Haruna, Seraphim, and Yuki went around searching for Ayumu's scattered body parts and took them back home. The parts easily pieced back together, but Ayumu didn't wake up. Haruna then attempted to kiss him awake like he was Sleeping Beauty, but Yuki refused to let the pipsqueak touch her man. When they started arguing, Seraphim told them she had just the thing and popped a pill into his mouth. She claimed it was a revival medicine, but when Ayumu's body started jerking around, she realized that she'd accidentally given him the poison pill instead. Hours later, Ayumu still hadn't woken up, and Haruna became worried that something was wrong with him. Seraphim said he might have been refusing to wake up because of what happened with Hellscythe, and she was right. He believed no one needed him, and as he floated around in his mind, Haruna, Yuki, and Seraphim all showed up. They each told him something which broke his spirit even more, and then disappeared before he could do anything. Meanwhile, back in the real world, Ariel dropped by to see Haruna because Haruna had called and asked her for help. She said she couldn't understand why Ayumu wasn't waking up and pleaded with the head teacher to help her. In response, Ariel pointed out that it was the first time in Haruna's selfish life that she was concerned about someone else. She also said she was glad Haruna met Ayumu and told her that she was the only one who could save him. Before Haruna could ask what she meant, he put her to sleep using magic and quietly wished her luck. At that time, Ayumu was contemplating going to sleep forever, and false images of Haruna suddenly appeared, encouraging him to do so. They told him that nobody cared what happened to him, and swore that everyone would be better off if he vanished. Since he was already swimming in doubt, he easily accepted their words and slowly began to vanish. However, the real Haruna crash-landed into space like a runaway rocket and began beating beating up her imitators. She also said Ayumu was a pathetic fool for believing the lies he'd been told. After she got rid of all the fakes, she started beating Ayumu up and told him to snap out of his depressive state. Ayumu tried to argue that he was irrelevant to the plot, but Haruna assured him that he was the main plot and said that if he ever wanted to see Hellside again, he should wake up. Still, he refused and reminded her that Hellside had chosen the king of the night over him. His pity party annoyed Haruna so much that she headbutted him and asked him to stop acting like he was the only one hurting. She then tried to punch him again, but suddenly stopped and said she couldn't care less if he came back or not. After she left, Ayumu sat nursing his head, but a few seconds later, he returned to the real world and comforted Haruna, who had been crying. Unknown to them, Seraphim had been watching for them in the hallway, but she decided not to interrupt their moment. As she walked upstairs, she ran into Saris, who tossed a bundle at her. She said Seraphim would need it for what was to come, and Seraphim held onto it as her life depended on it. A little while later, Ayumu suddenly stood up and walked over to the window. Seraphim walked into the room at that moment and told them that a megalo was on the way. Ayumu said he could sense it and was convinced that King was behind it. Speaking of King, he was at the Tokyo Tower with Hellscythe and told her that since she refused to grant his wish like a genie, he would destroy the city. Fast forward a few hours, and Ayumu and Haruna arrived at the tower to meet the duo. Not surprisingly, they ignored King's existence and began talking to Hellscythe. Ayumu asked her to come back home, and she sent him her response using a paper plane. In it, she asked whether things were more peaceful without her, and Ayumu admitted they were. However, he said that things weren't the same without her. Hellscythe tried to send another response, but he walked up to her and snatched the paper away. This time, she wrote that she was a nuisance, and that pissed Ayumu off, so he crumbled up the paper. Seeing this, King complained about being ignored, but Haruna told him to shut up. Ayumu then asked what his endgame was, and he revealed that he made Hellscythe summon a megalo because she refused to let him rest in peace. Meanwhile, Seraphim stood at the tower's highest point, watching the megalo descend. It turned out that when Saris handed her the bundle earlier, she revealed that only a vampire who had ingested Hellscythe's blood could play the tune to seal the gates of the underworld. Back in the present, the megalo opened its eyes, and ghosts began flying out of it, so Seraphim started playing the violin. The song she played affected the ghosts, but they were too much for just her to contain. Back inside the tower, King decided to force Hellscythe's hand by attacking Ayumu. Realizing this, Ayumu threw the first punch, but was sent flying by King's black mist twice. Still, he refused to back down, and as he stood facing King, Haruna called out to him, asking him to transform with her. Ayumu didn't think it was possible, but Haruna told him to trust her, and trust her he did. After their transformation, Ayumu pointed out that the black mist would be a problem, but Haruna assured him that she could handle it. Back outside, whales joined the ghosts, and just as Seraphim began to worry that she couldn't hold them back, Saris and the rest of her band showed up. Yuki was also there, so Seraphim began playing her heart out. Meanwhile, Ayumu and Haruna launched an attack on King, leading him to believe they were going to kick him. By the time he realized he'd been tricked, it was too late, and they were already cutting into his mist. The mist was surprisingly strong, so they had to power up to give themselves a fighting chance. As soon as the mist split, an explosion occurred, and Haruna was sent flying out of the tower to God knows where. Ayumu was lucky enough to remain in the tower, so he began using his fists. As they fought, he complained about King's selfishness and how inconsiderate he was towards Hellscythe. King defended his actions, but Ayumu said King knew nothing about Hellscythe, and with every punch, he talked about something Hellscythe enjoyed doing. Just as things were heating up, Hellscythe hugged Ayumu, silently pleading with him to stop his brutal assault, so he did. As he stood facing King, their wounds healed, and King told him that one day he would understand that immortality was a scam. Ayumu asked him not to compare their lives because, unlike King, he had his friends who were willing to do anything for him. King agreed with him, but still pleaded with Hellscythe to let him go. So with a heavy heart, she whispered the words into his ear. Once he was gone, the megalos disappeared, and everything returned to normal. After the sunset, Ayumu asked Hellscythe to return home and told her that he didn't care if their fate was doomed. She told him that he was sounding selfish, but he still didn't care and kept pleading and begging. In the end, Hellscythe spoke up for the first time, telling him she would stay at his side no matter what happened. Overwhelmed, Ayumu hugged her tightly and only let go because she complained that she couldn't breathe. Just then, Haruna returned, and the girl had some souvenirs with her. She said the blast had sent her on a trip around the world, and as she kept yapping, Hellscythe spoke, welcoming her home, which shocked her. Do you think the vampires would stop trying to eliminate Hellscythe? And would Haruna finally admit her feelings to Ayumu? If you got this far and enjoyed the recap, comment supernatural. Also, don't forget to check out the next video.